Things have not been going well for the Tories for some time, I'm going to say. Starmer's top aide, Morgan McSweeney, has been warning against complacency. He's got slideshows illustrating how around the world massive leads have slipped away. Nothing that happens in Labour's favour seems to sort of change that. Is it possible for Labour to be even more cautious than it has already been?
I mean, I think it's good.
Has it not hit peak caution yet?
I think it's good for an opposition party to not be complacent, and that's what that set of slides is about. And I think Labour have had some elections that didn't quite go the way they expected, like Uxbridge and South Ruislip being one of them. Now, we talked at the time about how that was a day in which they overturned this incredible 20,000 majority up in Selby, but they didn't quite manage to take Boris Johnson's old seat by 450, 500 votes. And the narrative became, Labour has failed, Sadiq Khan is bad, climate policies are bad, this is something that the Conservatives can use to fight back, which I think we can all agree, having looked at what's happened since, was the wrong takeaway for the Conservatives to get from that. But I think having those moments where you're like, actually, nothing is certain, there are no election results until people actually vote,
sure,
is
no, I mean, this is a
strategy.
true thing, but can you name anybody who actually believes that the Tories could win?
There are some Conservatives who I think believe that there is what's that phrase that David Davis used? A narrow but clear path to victory. Sorry to bring up David Davis. He's sort of the perennial optimist.
On the peak caution thing, I mean, it's possible that we have passed peak caution, as it were, and there are signs that Labour is starting to sound a bit more confident. I was quite struck by the tone that Keir Starmer used when he was interviewed a couple of days ago, challenged on the 28 billion borrowing, which the Tories are absolutely convinced is the Achilles heel of the Labour project. It goes back to, Labour will spend all your money and they'll borrow and they can't be trusted. And actually, really for the first time, I heard Keir Starmer say, you know what, I'm fed up with you trying to turn this into an albatross around my neck. Yes, we have a policy of borrowing to invest for the future because that's what the country needs. And I'm not sorry about it. And I will argue with you in defense of it. And so they've retreated a bit. They've diluted it. Yes, it's not exactly the pledge that was originally made a couple of years ago, but interest rates were much lower a couple of years ago. And actually, it seems to me that there has been at least a sense of we will retreat this far, but no further, and we're going to actually start making the case for what we want to do in government. Maybe I'm calling that too early, but I was pleasantly surprised at how punchy he was about that, actually.
I think there is a difference between being cautious and being anxious or racked by nerves and too tentative and not wanting to say anything because, if we say yes to this, then we'll get hammered on this side. And if we say no, we'll get hammered on that side. You can be quietly confident and also aware that you can't take anyone's votes for granted, which I think is the space that Labour are kind of in at the moment. I wrote about this today, about how elections how people sort of decide on an election campaign. And there's this old political received wisdom that there are only three types of election slogan. There's let us finish the job if you're in, there's time for change if you're not in, and there's don't let the other lot screw it up, which feels very relevant to right now. And I think Rishi Sunak's problem was that he tried to do briefly the time for change thing, which is really hard for an incumbent party to do, but that was what his reset was about. Yeah. I'm being the change candidate at Tory party conference. It didn't really work. It worked for Boris Johnson in 2019, so that's why I was trying it. It didn't really work. Now he gave his New Year's speech in his Q&A session this week, and it was all about, trust us to keep going, otherwise we're going back to square one. And I think the problem is that square one looks quite appealing at the moment. And so Labour can be time for change and also don't let the other lot screw it up. And both of those messages, just because of circumstances, are quite compelling.